In this video, we're going to look at an intro to the periodic table. We're going to cover the periodic table and how things are grouped, the elemental symbols for each one of the elements, and then we're going to look at the difference between metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. The periodic table of the elements is a man-made construction in which we put all the elements, and there's about 115 or so known elements, and we arrange them into groups based on their properties. Now technically the periodic table looks like this, quite a wide version of the periodic table. This doesn't fit on an A4 page, so generally when we have a version of the periodic table, we use this version. So this version is the same as the other version, only those lactanides and actinides that are down the bottom, we've taken that out of the middle and put them down the bottom. So we go from 56 here to 57 at the bottom, all the way through to 71, and then up to 72 here. Okay, so it's just a way of compacting the periodic table. We have rows called the periods of the periodic table. So first period, second period, third period, etc. And we also have the columns, which we refer to as groups. So we have group 1, group 2, and so on. So that's the periodic table. You'll notice in this periodic table, the full name of the elements isn't in each box, mainly because it doesn't fit. And for ease of writing, we use symbols for each of the elements. Now originally, the symbols looked something like this, and each element had its symbol. But as we added more and more elements, we changed the way that we do symbols to that we just use letters, because it makes it much easier. So a symbol consists of either 1 or 2 letters for each element, and in the case of 2 letters, the first letter is always a capital and the second is lowercase, and for the single letters, they are all capitals. Now the names are usually, or the letters are usually come from the name of the element. For example, nitrogen is N. However, some of the letters come from names of the element in another language. So for example, sodium, Na, comes from Latin. So we'll just have a look at some of the elemental symbols. So we have nitrogen, as I said before, which is just the N. Now because N is taken, once we look at other elements starting with N, we need to have the 2 letters. So for example, neon, Ne, nickel, Ni. Now sodium is Na, and as I said before, that's from the Latin, and the Latin word for sodium is natrium. The symbol for potassium is K, coming from the Latin kalium. Symbol for iron is Fe, coming from ferrum. And the symbol for gold, Au, from aurum, and silver, Ag, from argentum. Okay, so you can see here that we have symbols that are either 1 or 2 letters, first letter always being a capital, second letter lowercase, and they may come from the English name for the element, or they may come from another name for the element, usually in Latin, but there's a couple of Greek as well. What we're going to do now is look at the 3 major categories that elements in the periodic table can fit into. And the first one is metals. Now the majority of the elements in the periodic table are metals, and they have similar properties based on that fact. So metals are shiny or lustrous and usually grey in colour, and there are a couple of exceptions of metals that aren't grey, like gold and copper, but generally most of the metals are grey. Now all of the metals are solid except for mercury, which has the symbol Hg. Metals are malleable, which means that when you hit them with a hammer, they can bend and be flattened into sheets. They are ductile, which means when you stretch them, they stretch into wires. They are good conductors of heat and good conductors of electricity. The other main category of elements are the nonmetals, and the nonmetals are found in the top right-hand corner of the periodic table, except for hydrogen, which is found in the top left-hand corner. They also have common properties. Nonmetals are dull. They can be found in either solid, liquid, or gas at room temperature. However, bromine is the only one that is found as a liquid. They are brittle, which means that if you hit them with a hammer, they will crumble. They are not ductile, so they can't be stretched, so we can't turn them into wires. They are bad conductors of heat, or in other words, insulators of heat. They are bad conductors of electricity, or insulators of electricity. We have a third category of element in the periodic table, and we call these metalloids, or semi-metals. And these semi-metals can have the properties of either or both. So depending on the circumstance they're in, sometimes they will act as metals and other times they will act as non-metals. These are particularly important, these semiconductors, in building computers where you want them to conduct sometimes and not other times. So for example, silicon and germanium are elements that are used in the building of computer chips. In this video, we've looked at the periodic table, which groups the elements based on their properties. We've looked at the elemental symbols, which are either one or two letters, the first letter being a capital, which symbolize each one of the elements. We've looked at metals, which make up most of the periodic table, which are lustrous, solid, ductile, and malleable. And we've looked at nonmetals, which are dull, brittle, and insulators of heat and electricity. And we've looked at metalloids, which have characters from both the nonmetals and the metals.